The application deadline for the big three, moose, elk, and bighorn sheep, is March 26th. Today we're visiting with Wildlife Division Chief Casey Anderson to go over all the details of those seasons. I'm Mike Anderson with the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Casey, the moose, elk, and bighorn sheep lottery, if you get drawn for one of those three species, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a lot of people read it and go, once in my lifetime I'm going to get one, but that's not the case. Most of us will probably never get one, just because of supply and demand. But once you do get drawn, that's the only time in your lifetime, currently, as the way the state law reads, that you can get a moose, elk, or bighorn sheep license.
Whether, like for a moose or elk, whether it's a bull or a cow.
Right.
Okay. Casey, let's split the individual species up and let's talk about each one separately. More licenses available in 2025 for elk?
Yes, so we have just over 120 more licenses, and it's not evenly distributed across units, so when folks go to apply, they should, kind of check out the numbers of licenses available and where they want to apply and things like that. But yeah, for the most part, elk are doing well. You'll notice when you look at license allocation, there's some areas that didn't go up, and in fact, we have one unit where they went down, and that's in response to harvest rates, in response to population trends and things like that. And so in a lot of cases, we've been putting a lot of pressure on the elk in North Dakota, hoping to stabilize or bring those populations down in some areas. And so we'll continue to do that in some areas, and in some areas we feel like we're starting to get there, and we don't want to way overshoot that.
A new unit.
Yeah, we have a new unit, E7, and it's up around that J. Clark Salyer refuge area. That came about, there was landowners and hunters that area had been included in what we call E5, which is you get drawn for an elk license in a unit. Anybody with a unit tag can hunt E5, which essentially is the rest of the state that's not an elk unit. And partly that was due because E5 doesn't really have like what we would call great elk habitat. It's more sparsely spread out with habitat and agriculture and things like that, and so you get maybe more conflict. And so to give people an opportunity when elk move out of our general habitat areas for elk, there's an opportunity for harvest and an opportunity to maybe make sure that they don't cause more problems than is acceptable.
Casey, after November 24th in Unit E7, they can hunt another unit.
Yeah, so that's correct. So E7 being a brand new unit, we look at, and it's very limited number of licenses. The herd isn't very big there, and so we're giving out limited number of licenses, and we're not 100% sure what those elk are going to do when they start getting some. I don't know if it's going to be more pressure, but targeted pressure. The refuge is now open for hunting. Which, one thing to be aware of, if you're going to apply for that unit and you hunt on the refuge, it does require non-toxic bullets. So, for example, your copper bullets. But off of the refuge, it would be just normal type of ammunition. But we allow those folks after November 24th to go up to E1W to have an opportunity just in case the elk do something that is unexpected. We don't expect that. There is deer hunting pressure and things that happen on the refuge. We had to go through the federal process to get the refuge open for elk opportunity, and with that, it did require any new opportunities that come along on U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service refuges require some sort of non-toxic ammunition, and so we want to make people aware of that. But also, there is a public hunting opportunity there. And that's why we wanted to include J. Clark Salyer Refuge as open for elk hunting when we open a unit.
Okay, so the elk population's doing pretty well in North Dakota. Okay. Casey, let's move on to the moose licenses. More this year than last year?
Yeah, so we've got 54 more moose licenses this year. Most of that is in the Northwest. We had one unit way out on the eastern side, or M5, that we reduced the licenses just a little bit. And we've been putting a lot of pressure on moose too. Our moose populations are doing well. We did have that winter tick outbreak a few years back, which we haven't seen now for a couple of years. And so, yeah, we were able to add a few more licenses and a few more opportunities for folks.
Casey, still a couple of units closed for the moose lottery.
Yeah, those traditional habitat units are the ones that are still closed, and the moose just haven't been able to come back for one reason or the other.
Okay. Bighorn sheep. Now, bighorns, you still apply at the same time. Explain that whole process.
Yeah, so a few years back, well, more than a few years back, probably 10 years back or so, we had a pretty big pneumonia outbreak in bighorn sheep that affected our population. And so we switched the process that we do the bighorn sheep allocation. We really don't know how many bighorn sheep we have on the landscape available for hunting opportunity until more like that end of August, beginning of September time frame. And so what we do is we make a bighorn sheep season available through the proclamation, with those licenses being determined in that end of August, beginning of September realm. And so instead of applying for a unit, a bighorn sheep tag, you're applying to get drawn for the opportunity at a bighorn sheep license. And then we just go down, if we have 6 licenses available, we take 1 through 6 and we start calling number 1, and they get the choice of their unit. Number 2 gets the choice of what's left, and so on down the line. And so that's worked really well. It's worked well for us to be able to maximize hunting opportunity and still manage those bighorn sheep populations that have been doing really well over the last number of years, so since that outbreak.
Yeah, big game biologist Brett Weedman does his summer population surveys, and that's kind of when after that is when you determine the number of licenses.
Yes, that's when he'll classify the rams that are, and find out recruitment of lambs and all that kind of stuff that really shows us what the population is doing right before hunting season. So since it's such a small number of licenses that we give out anyway, it gives us the ability to be really flexible and, like I said, maximize that potential opportunity for hunters. Even though the opportunity is still pretty low, but.
Okay, new unit.
Yeah, so the bighorn sheep realm is a little different than managing, say, elk or deer across an entire landscape. Bighorn sheep are very much homebodies when it comes to the type of habitats they like, type of habitats they need. And so they really do disperse themselves into individual herds. And so we added a new unit, and we actually shrunk one of the other units a little bit and changed some unit boundaries, which of course nobody that gets drawn is going to complain about, because they've never been drawn before and never will get drawn again. But it really allows us to make sure that our harvest is coming from those individual herds, because realistically, if you take all the rams out of a herd, then you gotta hope there's some dispersion, and that's a little harder to hope for than in some other types of species. And so to really target kind of individual groups, individual herds, where those opportunities exist, because the best thing to do is take mature rams when hunters hunt. We don't restrict them to any size or anything, but this gives them the best ability to make sure that they have an opportunity to harvest, one of those rams that's a mature ram, and then our population can continue to grow at a good pace.
Casey, are there things hunters can do applying for an elk or a moose tag to better their odds of getting drawn?
So yeah, when you look at the draw odds, you can look at that. We have that in our magazine, and I believe it's on our website. Yeah. And so, you can look at the draw odds, and you'll notice that any of those antlerless, essentially what we would call a cow tag for moose or elk, are a much higher draw success. There is a difference, though, than folks that are used to hunting like white-tailed does. It's especially on the elk side, it's not an easy hunt. It's probably one of the harder hunts to shoot an antlerless or cow elk, just because of the way that species kind of gets together in groups and things like that. Bulls will be running about here and there, where if you find the cows, you find them all. and they're a big animal. And so it's not as easy of a hunt, and so that's one thing to prepare folks. If they're going to take the easy route to get drawn, it might not be the easy route to harvest. But that being said, it's an opportunity. If you feel like you're never going to get drawn for one of these licenses and you're willing to do that, it is a great opportunity and pretty high draw odds, sometimes well over 50% or around 50% in some units. And then on the moose side of things, it's a much higher draw odd, right around probably that 50% again. But a cow moose and a bull moose are about the same as far as how the hunt's going to go in North Dakota, and it just comes down to how picky you want to be, no matter which tag you have.
And again, it's a once in a lifetime.
Yep.
Casey, what's the best way to apply?
So yeah, the best way is to get on our website and obviously do a little research on where you might want to go, what those units have to offer, what type of hunt you want, and then apply through our website by the deadline.
And the deadline is?
March 26th.
A lot of great information, Casey. Thank you.